So when you see the lad on the scaffold, why don't you say stop, go back down?
Because I was busy.
How long would it have taken you to have said, go back down, wait for me? Should we say 5 seconds?
Yeah.
So for 5 seconds of you pausing, because you notice he's there, don't you? You say hello to him.
Yeah.
So that takes, hello, that's 1 and a bit seconds. So why didn't you say, hello, do us a favour, get back down. I need to talk to you. Well, that's all the evidence. Anything arising out of that? What we're going to do now is, rather than do formal speech or whatever, we'll take questions from you, and also Richard's going to discuss some of the experiences which he's had both as a legal professional and also as a regulatory professional within this area. I'm sure that you all can realise what could have been done that day. And then we'll do a brief outline of the law at the end of that, and then we'll invite you to come to your verdict. And then when you've convicted both of them, Ian will pass sentence, and we'll turn Chris upside down and get all the money he's got out of his pockets.
Can I just say before Richard begins, Mr. Campbell, as you probably appreciate, in a real court of law, if this was real life, by now you'd be in the cells for contempt.
Keeping you warm.
Pass over today.
Just congratulations, Chris. Well done. Staying there, not hitting him. But it was. But you see that how terrible Chris came across there. But as an organisation, if that reflects on the organisation that he's working for. It's deeply unattractive to be the defence lawyer for somebody like Chris, because basically your defence is he was an absolute idiot and you should have looked after him better. And that's it basically. And that's the way the health and safety law works. That's how it's developed. That's the sort of policy of health and safety law, is that those people who can make the difference make the difference. When you're dealing in the construction industry, you've got to be able to make the difference. So if you've got control of that site, if you're going to let people like Chris onto your site, and he's probably not the worst, but if you're going to let people onto your site like that, you've got to have controls there. I was thinking actually there's a really good case that came out last year. It's the HSE and Murray. So HSE v Murray. It's in the first instance, so it's not going to be written up or anything like that, but it's in the safety press. And you might have seen it, and it was that where you saw the scaffolder 18 metres up, looking in the window. He's got his harness on, but it's not clipped on. But he was the one who actually got fined. And if you do find, Arkwright's guilty there, with their turnover, they're going to have quite a tasty fine on this. But he was fined because the HSE inspector at court said, we've investigated this, we were happy that person was given every opportunity to behave in the right way, and the pressure was put on him to behave in the right way, but he didn't. And therefore, we moved our focus from the employer, or the site controller, sounds like something different there, site controller, to the actual person. But if you think about Arkwright's here, you've got the health and safety officer who's overruled by the operations manager. We heard that this morning. The operations manager wipes out the idea of netting or whatever because of costs. They change the system of work with the scaffolding. They don't want the scaffolding up there because it's going to stop them entrance to the site so they can keep going their business. It's just one after another. If you think back a couple of years ago, a big case, Marks and Spencer with asbestos. And basically they tried to remove asbestos from their sites and keep the shop going. And that sounded awful in court. That sounded, they must have had, being Marks and Spencer's, this would have been, Marks and Spencer's asbestos removal. But it sounded terrible in court that basically they could be accused of, you could have done a bit better if you shut the shop down. And if you shut the shop down, you'd lose your profits. Profits before safety. It's the nuclear button in health and safety. And it's a nuclear button in fining as well. So for all the squirming that poor old Chris had, that was reflected back. That will be reflected back in reality to the people who employed him in the first place. And he knew him for 20 years, worked with him for 5 years. It's not as if to say, oh, he had all the qualifications, he turned up, we were let down. We reasonably relied on somebody who was well qualified and they let us down. That argument, that can get you so far, but it get you actually nowhere in this situation. So, although poor old Chris had to go through it on that, he was doing it for everybody. It's almost like a Christian thing. He was copying it for everybody involved in that process. The organisation, John, who was the operations director, and all the rest of it. So that's the way health and safety work. That's the philosophy of health and safety. Is in some ways there's no such thing as an accident. There's no such thing as an idiot who's let you down. What it is a system. You have systems that work, and if the systems don't work, then the people who can write the systems or in control of the systems, they're going to be the guilty ones. As well as, you just can't let people like Chris off as well. But that's the way the system works there. So, in a summing up, if we're doing a proper summing up, the prosecutor would be saying, yes, we've all had fun with Chris and all the rest of you would be saying that, but that's what you're saying, we've all had fun with Chris. But look beyond that. Yeah, Chris is going to have to be prosecuted, he's going to have to be punished. But they're going to be saying, look beyond that. Look at the organisation. Look at the people who could have done something about this. Look at the people who could have spent a couple of grand on netting. Look at the people who could have put that extra bit of scaffolding in. Those are the people who will be looked at. And in today's times with the new sentencing guidelines, will have absolutely eye-watering fines. I've got a case recently, no injuries at all on the site, just went on site, saw it, looked at the turnover, they're fined £150,000 for no injury at all. Just a whiff of an injury that might happen in the future. So that's what the sentencing guideline, that's the reality of today. So any sort of questions on that?
Because one of the things on sentencing is that there's two categories which the judges look at, harm and culpability. And in harm, it's not about what harm actually occurred. It's what, as a result of the omissions or act, what was the risk of the harm. So, hence why Richard can show a case where there was no injury, but the company was fined high because the risk of harm was high. Now, when you're dealing with anything to do with work at height, it's generally the highest form of harm.
Yeah.
You see in the health and safety statement, officer's statement, the percentages of serious or fatal injuries as a result of working from height. And as you'll see in the document which I produced on behalf of the prosecution, this wasn't a momentary lapse. This was failure to properly plan and supervise the work safely. No bird cage, no netting, all these obvious things. No permit to work system, no proper detailed division of responsibilities between each other. But the irony is that if you came to be sentenced, say if they only prosecuted one party in this, you are not able to say, oh well, culpability shared, as I put in the defence documentation. Can't say that. Because you are all equally liable, 100% for it. Even if you're the one at the bottom, or even if you're the principal, the main contractor, and you say, well look, like we did do a few failures here and there, but look, it was the subby who was really, no, that dog doesn't hunt. You are still done under the category. But it's not just that cost. It's not just the fine. It's not just the bit where those grubby lawyers get involved.
Speak for yourself. Speak for yourself.
It's, as Richard said earlier, it's also reputation. And reputation is earned over a number of years and lost overnight. Shakespeare said character was about the eyes of the soul, and it is. And you only ever have good character once. Once it's gone for good. But also on a pure economic point of view, what's also important to note is this. The time spent by key individuals from companies either defending these things, cooperating with prosecutions, giving witness statements to lawyers, dealing with potential coroners, dealing with the insurers, all that hourly time spent by those individuals, better spent them actually doing what they're in business for, to earn money. Because all that time's gone as well. And that's not even going into the human cost of it all. You know, there's a laugh with the Eurovision Song Contest. The Israeli Broadcasting Authority have engaged a company to do all the stage work for the Eurovision competition in May. But that company, when it ran a games event, a bridge collapsed and 3 people died. And what the company's saying, no, we're a different company. It's all the same directors. And there's such a big hoo-ha at the moment about whether or not that company will actually continue with the contract for Eurovision. Because of the reputational effect of something which happened over 10 years ago. And some of the directors of the new company had nothing to do with it, but some of them did. And there's their reputation solid. And that's something which we all need to pause for thought about. Is there any questions anybody's got in relation to what's been going on and what's said?
One thing you might like to take away with you as well, there's an interesting statistic that came up. It was last year or so. It was a freedom of information request on prosecutions. And these statistics now are 2 years old, but they still work. In the sense that freedom of information request on prosecution. Who's prosecuting? Organisations or individuals? And then directors. So I'm sure people in this room, you report to people, you report to your directors, or you report to the board, or whatever. You report back. In 2016, there was 45 prosecutions of directors, so individual directors. 45. Well, you might not think that's a lot, but the year before, there was 15. And the year before that, there was 7. So you've got that curve going up like that for individual directors being prosecuted. And I think last year was the first time when I've been defending an organisation, I had to say, I got a phone call, I was waiting from that director the night before we're going to the magistrates, because that's where it all starts off, where you end up, but you always start with the magistrates. And he was being prosecuted, quite a decent bloke, you know, recognised him, you know, golf club, regular, all those sort of things, all the regular type things. But I couldn't 100% guarantee that he'd walk out the same door he walked in. I was pretty sure, did a lot of work to make sure that that was the case, but I couldn't give him 100% on that. And so I said, yes. His question was, do I have to take an overnight bag? And I said,
Don't
what's going to
forget
say? Yeah, I'll bring a toothbrush. So, you know, times, they are changing, to quote Paul Bob.
I just had a question.
Yeah, go on.
I'm going to wait for the microphone so
It's a megaphone.
Station.
I'm like a ballerina.
Oh, no. It just came out of something you were saying earlier when you were prosecuting, and you said, did you take him through the risk assessment? Because I'm definitely going to do all my paperwork now, believe me. There's going to be paper coming out. And everyone's going to sign everything. But we all struggle with paperwork, and sometimes you think people just sign it. Do you read it? When we have to on the iPhone, it says you must click on this to say you have read the terms and conditions.
Yeah.
You go, yeah, I've done that. So in a court of law, because we have health and safety culture and then health and safety documentation. So you can have all the forms you've got, but they could be worthless because nobody's read them and you haven't taken them through. So is that, because I can see you having because if there's a strong health and safety culture, is that a defence? If you haven't got that one piece of paper because someone forgot to sign it?
Well, culture's right, it's got to be top down.
Yeah.
One of the things which took out of these statements is that when a health and safety investigator comes on site, they don't just look into that incident. They'll also generally have a quick check about to see if there's any other breaches of health and safety while they're there. When an investigator is speaking to a director of a company, I'll say to them, what do you understand your health and safety policy to be? And if he or she cannot answer that question, the investigator knows, I'm in here, right? The more I dig, the more I'm going to find. And that's the first question that any investigator really does, is ask the top people, what do they understand by it? Because if they can't answer that question, they know that they're going to find things as a result of the investigation. And that can be about bribery, it can be about health and safety, it can be about money laundering and anything. The people at the top don't understand what their responsibilities are. You can bet your bottom dollar the people at the bottom don't understand it.
And I like the question because you're talking about culture. A culture is a good defence, and that will provide you with good ammunition if that last piece of paper, which is always missing, it's always the one that goes underneath the table or gets the dog runs off with. But that is a good defence, and the law is changing. If you look at it's a bit extreme, but if you look at a corporate manslaughter, one of the things of a decision whether it's going to be a gross failure is the court has to take into context or take into account whether that was a lone slip, whether the culture of the organisation would dictate that there was a failure, but whether it's gross or not. So the culture is very important there. But as David says, this thing at the top, I give a lot of talk to directors and liability and things like that. They don't need to know the ins and outs of manual handling regulations or the VDUs and things like that, but they do need to know what their responsibilities are. And looking at the policy and leading for health and safety is if it's demonstrable, it will stand you in very good stead. That's where the money invested in health and safety pays itself back. But when you give that ammunition to, if you find yourself in a situation, ammunition to the lawyers to actually bring that to the fore.
But Richard, it wouldn't be a defence, surely.
Not in a court of manslaughter.
It would be in a court of law. I mean, the fact that you give somebody a document, you can't just say, I gave them the document. The duty is on you to make sure they understand it. Okay. And of course, in the construction industry, you've got lots of Romanians, Polish, Lithuanians, and there may well be a safe system of work may well require a foreman of the same nationality, so that things can be explained properly. So you can't just abdicate responsibility.
If you were a sole trader and prosecuted for this, so no one's died, this is a Cat A harm, medium culpability case. Starting point in prison. If you have any previous breaches of health and safety on your record and a bad culture as a sole trader, you go to prison for this. If you're a company, you don't. It's the fines because no one's died. But no, if you were a sole trader, you would probably, first offence you'd get away with a fine, second offence you'd be lucky to get a suspended sentence because you're unlikely to be a big star criminal, you're not going to be on probation and that, you'll get a short prison sentence. And it's for sole traders, they tend to be, it's their man, it's the wife who does the books or whatever.
Yeah. But remember Section 37 of the Health and Safety Work Act. If an organisation, in a larger organisation, not even in a, not sole trader side, if you're in a larger organisation, if an offence has taken place and that offence is commissioned with the consent, connivance or neglect of a senior manager or director, then that senior manager or director can be looked upon. It can be looked upon as an individual. They become that sole trader. They become that they step in the line of that situation there. So Section 37, and back to that idea, 3 times as many directors being prosecuted as before, is that way. And the HSE, as Dave was saying earlier, they've got to demonstrate and they've got to show they're worth their money. So they're going to, it's much more spectacular to have, clang the door going behind somebody or a huge great fine than perhaps what they're traditionally doing was going out advising people to try and prevent and all the rest of it. So all sorts of pressures are reaching at this sort of point at the moment that makes things quite interesting in the world of regulatory law, as it were.
Anything else from anybody? Yes, sorry.
We're focusing on sort of principal contractor and contractor in this case, but are we seeing more prosecutions of clients, principal designers?
Principal design is too early for principal designers. There is one, I think, on its way,
Yes.
But it's clients, definitely. Clients were second. If you look at a hit parade of who wants to look after CDM, which came in the late 90s, clients were second after principal contractor. Principal contractor's got a big target, the big sort of spot, come and prosecute me thing on their chest when they go into work.
But even if you're not prosecuted, you were investigated. and they send you a bill.
Yeah,
You
fees
think-
for intervention. Everybody loves it.
Yeah. So and you're still going to spend all that time dealing with that investigation.
Yeah.
Whereas the irony is that, as you were saying earlier, if you have a top-down approach to the way in which you deal with money laundering, health and safety, environment offences or whatever, once they come in and ask those initial questions and they realise that people understand what they're talking about, then you're more likely to be given the benefit of the doubt at the end of the day. Because there is this, they go through the motions, they'll write to your solicitors or to you before they decide whether or not to charge or issue a summons against you, to say, do you have any representations which you'd like to make before we make the decision? Because it's something they've got to do, and then they've got to apply what's called a two-stage prosecutorial test. All these things about this being a one-off, about improvements which you've made, all these other things, go into that melting pot when they're deciding the second aspect, which is it in the interest of justice? So when you do have someone who hasn't died, but may have been going on a frolic of their own, as we would say, or like the example which Richard gave, where they...
HSE, Murray, look at Murray.
Yeah, they went in to investigate the company, gave them a clean bill of health.
Yeah. That's nirvana. That is for the company. Absolutely. That's back to your culture. That culture must have been good. And back to the learned judge's question, you won't get away with it if you say, oh yeah, they had this induction process. But what does culture look like? You know, so that's the big question, isn't it? So is it audited? You know, do you audit afterwards? Okay, they've been inducted, so a couple of hours later, a day later, a week later, we go back and say, are they behaving in a way that you think they should be behaving in that induction work? And then you've got that culture to fall back on. That's your defence.
That's why I allowed Mr. Campbell's questions about
grossly unfair.
about his sloppy way of working and general.
Sorry.
You've gone out, in this case, you've gone after Chris quite heavily.
Yes.
I wasn't so good. Sorry. You've gone after Chris quite heavy on this, but one of the big things is the net was taken away from the...
Yeah, that's a very good point. And although we've gone for Chris in a big way, that's one of the things we're trying to get across, is that although the knockabout stuff is with Chris, really, where the wrongness is, or where the problem is not with Chris, is the system that Chris sort of fitted in with.
If the net had been in, he would have gone to floor.
Right.
Second thing is, harness is the second line of defence, not first line of defence.
Yeah.
So you should have had the net in. If you look at the first photo in the thing and look at the armrail around the top, which is completely wrong, there's no protection. That's principal contractor, because they was the ones who hired the scaffolder in the first place.
But the funny thing is, if there'd been a net, there wouldn't have been the injury which was capable of triggering widow.
Yeah, that's what I say.
Right? If the guy hadn't been injured, so if there'd been a minor infraction, but there'd been no injury to report because of the changes in that, was one you just need to take the note of, you'd have been fine.
They took the green net away.
Yeah. Oh, this is the example we've used today is merely illustrative. We could have gone on and we could have gone for every number of different parties here, indicted them on different things. We could have had 4 defendants in the dock, but we'd be here till Friday, Saturday. That's the problem.
I'm just saying what.
That's well noticed.
Of the 45 directors that were prosecuted last year, how many of those ended up with custodial sentences?
It's 2 years ago, and I think it was about... I can't say, I've got these figures, but I think 10 at the most.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because a lot of suspended sentences, even in the community, things like that. Because with my director, he had to be interviewed by the probation officers and things like that, and getting across a witness, we had to get it, well, he got it across that it would be punishing his family and punishing the business if he goes away and things like that. But I tell you what, he'll never forget. It's not a process that people would enjoy going through or ever forget.
And I don't think it's, well, I know in a number of people we've seen go down massive, and
Your client's more than mine.
I have more cases than Ian. No, it's weird, you go and see them down themselves afterwards, and no, you just wait about 15-20 minutes, just get them all booked in, and very different. This is for any case. They complete the big I am upstairs, but down there, very, very different.
You sit there, you're sitting in the first time you go in there as a lawyer, and you sit down and you're explaining all the system and things like that. And sat behind a big desk and swinging around, and he says, "Well, I can't go to prison for this." Kind of like, yeah.
And what was the longest sentence?
Most I ever got was 2 life imprisonments and 10 years on top for murdering 2 prostitutes in Winchester.
I do. If you think about the T-Bay incident a few years back, where I think he got 9 years. But I think with the new sentencing guidelines on individual gross negligent manslaughter, I think those will be halcyon days now. I think because they start off with sort of
If there's
18
a profit
years.
motive, you're going away.
But that was 5 people who got killed at the time. So everybody went, but it was, you know, if you look at it, it was horrible, horrible, horrible. But he went away for 9 years, but God knows what he'd go away for now. You know, it'd be, you know, with the new sentencing guidelines on individual sentencing, they're quite severe.
Gents, just for the benefit of the room, I'm Phil Morton. I lead on our casualty team and proposition for Aon, and there's a few of us over here listening very, very carefully to this. With everything you've just said, I was just going to chuck in something that will probably be of interest to most people for not good reasons, and that is we've been looking very closely at the moment around a rail accident investigation branch investigation into a near miss. If you Google RAIB Egmanton, you'll be able to read it. And it was a near miss, nobody got hurt. But essentially, the findings of the RAIB are that despite the subcontractor who was nearly run over with his gang of workmen on the rail track, the network rail system still hadn't sufficiently instilled in the individual the level of understanding of the safe working practices. So essentially what it's saying is, despite them being signed off as competent, despite there being systems of work, despite it being documented and signed off, that employee still hadn't done what everybody assumed they would do in the hierarchy. Nobody got hurt. It was a 125 mile an hour East Coast mainline train bearing down on a gang of workers. The text itself is well worth reading, but that allows us to come back into organisations and say, despite everything we're hearing today about directors being charged more, despite being able to potentially offset some of the company liability to Section 8 offences where the individual themselves has committed some breaches, we've got the national RAIB suggesting you can train them, you can sign them off as competent, you can entrust them to do the work that you've given them. But if it doesn't work, if the safe system is still not followed, your training wasn't good enough. And that swings the finger back around to the organisation again.
So it's back to the culture thing. You've got a system, great, you know, everybody's doing it, it looks good, but does it work? The question is, you've got to ask yourself, does it work? How am I going to prove that this works? And how am I going to prove it to somebody else that it works? That's the culture. That's going to keep you out of jail, or keep your directors out of jail.
Any other questions? Yes. Yeah. We'll pass it. And there's the gentleman at the back.
Just when we said about the prosecutions for clients, do we know what the failures were by the clients in terms of CDM? In general, not at each one.
It's providing information and providing the sort of tools really for the principal contractor or the designer to actually make the right decisions.
So pre-construction
information and employing the right people. You know, like Chris here. You know, was he the right type of person? Easy to mate. You know, a question I asked him, you're in the habit of employing your mates all the time, which it's that sort of thing. It's giving the actual contractors, principal contractors, designers, this sort of giving them a chance basically to do their jobs. If you don't give them the right information or you don't get the right people in the right job, you're not giving them a chance.
So the due diligence and whatever will come into it. Yeah. Okay.
And also you look at the quotes. If you get 3 quotes for a job and you employ the person who's offered the lowest quote, but that quote, I more in a hurry would realise actually doesn't reflect the job, then the chances are they are going to be O'Reilly's builders from faulty towers. You know, so are you getting, you know, the idea, is it piecework? So therefore there's an incentive for the people to cut corners because there's time pressures. You know, so there's nothing wrong with having a proper set fee for something, but when things outside of your control, like this one, they're in the middle of the job, they find there's some fragility, there should have been a mechanism to reopen the pricing structure so that the price didn't become an imperative to cut corners and to play fast and loose with people's safety. So there are ways around it which still work economically for people, but it's having the breadth of vision to realise that you need to plan for different eventualities to ensure that the one thing which is never undermined is the health and safety of those who are working on it. Because actually, for the sake of £5 grand, you know, you end up with something much worse.
A lot of sleepless nights. Happy days.
Can I just say one thing as well, just some personal
Oh,
experience?
sorry, it's a question in the back there. We forgot. Did you got your question?
Oh, was somebody else? No? Yeah.
I thought the judge was being the chair, but he's gone now.
I
can only say that.
kind of like risk assessments, method statements and so forth, but didn't really hear a lot about a construction phase plan, which would set out the responsibilities of each of the contractors, the kind of general principles of prevention and so forth. Was there actually a construction phase plan in place for this project?
No, there wasn't even a work permit system. There was no actual system. That's what was set up. Those back of a fag packet, site rules, and some cobbled together stuff. That was it.
I think there's a kind of, I don't mean ignorance, but I think some people are unaware that irrespective of the size of, you know, you can have an electrician come in to fit a socket on your wall, that guy still has to produce a construction phase plan.
Mm-hmm. Especially in electrics, because the potential harm from electrics is massive. You know, don't get me wrong, the fact is that don't underestimate, people end up in the dock for a reason, and often it's because of stupidity. Chancing it. It's never going to happen to me. You know, it happened to someone else. You know, it's...
And you think about it, some of the things you saw today, you know, as an inspector, you go in, and, but foreseeability, obviously incredibly important in investigating incidents. So you've got a list there, and the site rules, I don't know if you had a look at it, but it said permits to work. Nobody knew what the permits were. So it's fantastic. The case is just made for the inspector. When I was an inspector, you'd look at that, you say, where are the permits to work? And they say, well, we haven't got them. And then you just sit back and relax and think, well, how am I going to get this to court? Because this is going to court. Because you've got it there. They recognise that a system requires a permit to work. It needs, the risk management needs a permit to work, and they don't follow it through. So you've just got perfect evidence there. So again, that's the danger of lots of paperwork, ill-considered paperwork. Something comes out and bites you because you say, well, we don't need that. We don't need that. You might be right. You might have moved on from a system that you needed, but you leave it in there and somebody says, well, where's this document that you say you need to continue with this thing, whether it's a permit to work or whatever, and you say, well, actually, we don't need it now because our systems have moved on. You're really on the back foot straight away. So lots of, paper systems, they have to be constantly watched. They're like an animal that's sort of constantly evolving, and you have to make sure that they still exist and doing the things that you want, because they can cause you all sorts of problems.
If I could just take your point slightly further, particularly with the industry that you guys come in, but again, there's other people in here have a very similar background with multi-site, that yes, there can be 101 CDM-related plans, but do people actually at the site themselves, like in your industry, if a refurb is going to take place because the motor manufacturer's decided they suddenly want a different colour of paint, that's often decided at group level, but the people deemed in charge of the site, do they understand that? And is that safety plan then communicated to them effectively? Or again, are we into this paperwork scenario of, we're great on paperwork, but the reality of local control is nothing like what the paperwork perhaps suggests? I was also just going to pick up on a point Richard made earlier on. You referenced Marks and Spencer's. You would have seen three safety geeks at the back of the room suddenly go, and almost in unison, we quoted the fine. The fine for that particular case that Richard mentioned was £1 million fine with £600,000 court costs. The thing I would suggest to that is, yes, that's a lot of money. However, every single health and safety course to do with asbestos that's now run in the country utilises that as a particular case.
And I think that was before the sentencing guidelines, I think, as well. So it'd be absolutely eye-watering. Absolutely eye-watering what it'd be now. So £1 million would be looked upon a small change to
So if you are, let's have a look. Very large organisation. So you've got a turnover of over £50 million a year. What did we say on this one? We said this is a Cat A harm, yeah? Medium culpability. Starting point 1.3 million. Range 800,000 to 3,250. We've got very high culpability. Starting point 4 million. Range of sentences 2,600,000 to 10 million.
But with Marks and Spencer, I've been in court recently with a client, 600 million turnover, and following the Alton Towers case, which is 400 million turnover. Anything above that now is regarded as a very large company. So you're encouraged to go up a harm category when you look at it. So, and if you're at the top, you just bump it up, you just stick your finger in it and decide, the judge decides how much it is, how much it's going to be. So those days, Marks and Spencer's being fined £1 million for keeping its shop going and doing its asbestos work at the same time. That will be looked upon as the good old days, as far as fines are concerned.
And sole trader for this one, starting point, 1 year custody, banned 26 weeks to 18 months custody. So that's first offence.
Of course, he's not been found guilty yet.
Yeah.
That's true.
Shall we turn to that? I know we have a question now.
Had this been a member of the public who presumably the subcontractor didn't have a duty of care for, had gone up the scaffold and the same thing had played out, how would you have presented this case differently? Would you have gone after a different person in this instance?
I don't think so.
No, I wouldn't have the same people.
Yeah, it'd have been worse. Obviously, it'd been a lot worse. The culpability would be absolutely sky high. But I had a case recently where, again, this was where somebody fell through a fragile roof in a, can't say where it was because it's too easy to identify, but a place of public workers, work being done in one area, people still going on there, fell through, landed on a member of the public, which was quite a good story because it saved the bloke falling. Didn't do the member of the public that much good, but it was all right. But it played very, very badly in court, very, very badly.
I had a farmer, got a subcontractor in, bales of baling hay, round bales. The bale came off the end of the fork, rolled down the hill. Guy driving past in a van, bale of hay pushed the van. The guy was killed. Farmer and subcontractor were done, but we got not guilties. But the guy who died was a cellist from ELO. Yeah, but it doesn't stop. Civil culpability, yeah, they all got done civilly. Managed to get them acquitted by a jury. But this was a man who's not used to the system, law-abiding bloke with his wife and kids, and bang, he's facing prison. It's, I think it took 4 years from the tragic death to acquittal.
Yeah.
That's a nice everybody to end on.
Yeah.
Happy days, so here we go. Anybody else? No? Oh, wait, sorry, lady back.
So it was Chris Wheeldon on site, he was working, Mark invited his mate along as an extra pair of hands. But when would you actually class, just to play a bit of devil's advocate, that guy to be an employee or contractor of Chris Wheeldon? Because he had approached the site initially. I know obviously if he was a member of the public and there was an injury associated and everything else, it would still come to court. But we're viewing Chris Wheeldon at fault or partial because he had a duty of obligation to an employee. but at one point does that become clear that he was an employee of Chris Wilden?
Matter of fact in degree, and that's how you would prove it. You would prove it on the basis that he turned up at that place, at that time, at that season, for the purposes of engaging in lawful employment with Chris. So the moment he goes on, so that's why he's there. He's not there to shop in the factory, he's not there for any other purpose. That's why he's there. You wouldn't technically have to prove over my body, it's because he's put the high-vis jacket on, you would prove it. I think that although I have run some dodgy defences in my time, the idea of running that he wasn't an employee, I would have to turn and move on to my next dead horse to flog, I think, because the judge would laugh me out of court.
But I think civil law probably explores that a lot more for a case of personal injury. I don't know, with the delivery and things like that. You know, Lane and Shire roofing, when there's a sort of contractor, you know, who's got his own tools and looks after his own tax, it can be regarded as an employee. On the criminal side of things, because we've got Section 2 and Section 3 and all the rest of it, there isn't so much sort of agonising about it, whereas on the civil side, there is, because obviously the relationships for compensation and things like that are a bit more developed on that side of things. But on the criminal side...
But as Ian was saying, that you know, with the zippity-doo-dah delivery and the Pimlico plumbers, the idea of people being hiding behind the fact, oh, he's not my employee, no, you've got a duty of care to him.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
But the focus is on the defendant, not the employee.
Yeah.
It's provided the defendant is an employer.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether the injured party was an employee.
Shall we go to the vote?
Do the jury want to deliberate by themselves?
What
we thought we'd do is we're a little bit early, so that's all good. We've arranged some refreshments in the other room. We thought we'd give the opportunity for the jury to deliberate over refreshments, and we'll place the ballot boxes in the smoking room, and then you'll be able to make your votes, and when you come back in, we'll have a vote.
Will the foreman of the jury please stand? Mr. Foreman, can you just answer my first question, either yes or no? Has the jury reached verdicts upon which you are all agreed?
Yes.
And on count one, do you find the defendant guilty or not guilty?